We have here a 68 custom deluxe reverb amp, the reissue, not a real 68. It is a bit odd to me that on this reissue they included these black vertical lines, which yes, some of the early silver panels had. The consensus among the people who talk about such things was that was actually an error. It was a spacing guide that was left in place on the early batch, and the black lines disappeared pretty quickly. But anyway, the ticket says replace light, replace tubes, noisy, can you make quiet? Now this model, the custom, with the shared reverb and trim on both channels, tends, in my experience, to be very noisy. And every time I say that, someone says, I've got one, it's never been noisy, never have any issues with it whatsoever. The ones I have had in, even the ones that came in not knowing that it really needed repair, like it had a broken preamp tube or something. The owner was unaware that it was noisy. You could hear it hissing from the other room. Let's power this one on and see if it's noisy. So I'm not going to use a standby. It's got a tube rectifier, just power it on. Okay, the owner said replace the light. The light comes on. Maybe it's a little bit loose and intermittent, or maybe he just doesn't like the blue. We will find out. I'll give him a call after this. So let's plug in. And I can hear it hissing before I play. It's a white noise sound. Got the volumes off, the reverb off. A good deluxe reverb should be almost completely silent with the reverb level off and the volumes off. Should be a little bit of hum normally. Not much, just so you can barely hear that the amp is on, if all is well. But I definitely hear that. I'm going to turn it up on the playback level for you to hear what the nature of the sound is before I turn the instrument up. All right. So we got this SG because it was already out. 3 on the volume here. And see what sounds we get. See how bad the reverb is. A little bit of hum at the highest ranges. That's due to how the wires are done at the V3 socket. Aside from that white noise in the background, it sounds just fine. Let's try the normal channel. That custom channel voicing they do, you just got such a ton of mid-range. But aside from the white noise, again, I'm not hearing anything. Let me put this up on the bench and remove the rear panel. We'll tap on tubes. And let me get a look inside the amp to see if anything looks at all problematic. I think it's probably just the, in my view, faulty way they implemented reverb and trim on both channels. There are a couple ways to do it. One of them is the noisiest. Guess which way Fender did it. But anyway, let me open this up, take a look, make sure it's healthy, and then I'll call the owner about, if it's not an obvious fault with the tubes, why he wants them changed. 2021 is not a good year to buy tubes unless you need to. And I'll ask him what he means about that light if it doesn't turn out to be loose or intermittent. So many Fenders these days come with this tube cage. I'm not a huge fan of it. I guess it can protect the tubes if you're carrying a bunch of stomp pedals in the back of your amp. Don't do that. But it just makes changing tubes on a gig much harder, especially if it is a rectifier tube, which is the most likely tube to fail in one of these. And they often rattle loose. Anyway, I just give them a tighten if the owner wants to get rid of them. They don't need to pay me to do that. All right, I've got the back off. I want to tap on tubes, see if we have any issue. While it warms up, I'm just going to get all these shields out of the way. I noticed immediately that the external speaker jack hardware is missing. So before I do anything else, I want to make sure the existing hardware here is tight. That's a standard Switchcraft 12A, 11A nut. I have got hundreds of those. That's not going to be a problem, but I'm not going to tighten it from the outside. I have to make sure it's secure on the inside. These things and the input jacks are almost never tight on Fender reissues. That's a pretty easy thing to do. So easy they could have done it. Let me turn off, put my phone in airplane mode. Sorry about that. In fact, I had a guy I was talking through some troubleshooting on the phone. It was just yesterday, and he was getting a weird noise. I said, "Is your cell phone on your amp?" It was. Slight microphonics from this tube. Might be some from here. I'm hearing the tube acoustically ring out. Definitely getting some from this one. I don't know yet that that's going to be enough to be a problem. Just something to keep an eye out on. But none of the tubes seem faulty. We'll power it off. And we'll check that it has the correct 2 amp fuse in there. Surprising number of amps don't have the correct fuse. 2 amp, good. We don't have to give anyone any lectures. All right, so time to pull this chassis out, and we'll tighten up that speaker jack with a new nut and see what we see. Like so many reissue Fenders, the aluminum foil that's stuck to the top of the cabinet is adhered to the front of the chassis. And with the amp powered off and unplugged from the wall, I'm going to take this standard table knife and use the back side of the blade to work that aluminum foil free from the chassis and push it back up against the cabinet. Otherwise, when I pull the chassis out, I'm going to have a big tear of foil. So you're going to have less efficient shielding in the future. And little bits of foil like to fall down into the chassis, which is full of high voltage electronics, which is not a good piece for stray pieces of aluminum foil to be. So you can use a cake knife, you can use a putty knife, all kinds of flat tools. This is a set of silverware we don't like very much. I just use a table knife. Important though to use the back side of the blade. Even with this blade that isn't very sharp, I don't want to cut that foil. And now the chassis should pull right out without leaving any huge problems behind. All right, things I check on any Fender, especially the reissues, make sure the hardware is tight. It just rarely is. That bias nut was not tight. That's a pretty critical thing to have right. I will do these nuts from the other side, but the choke, reverb, and output transformer are done from this side. and they're often very loose. And once they begin to get loose, the component, especially the output transformer, wiggles back and forth and strips things out, and the flanges get bent and everything goes to hell. Very technical term, going to hell. Google it. With a bit of study, you'll figure it out. Or just glance at the freaking news these days. All right, as I mentioned, the input jacks, speaker jacks, and bias jacks are rarely tight on these, since that's how a lot of the crucial grounds are made. I just confirmed that. Don't want to chase a bunch of mystery noises if all that's the problem is a Lucy that needs to be tidy. All right. Now on all Fender reissues, even the relatively new ones like this, even if this was a brand new, straight from the factory, I like to at least physically examine the filter caps, because the IC and occasionally Leland caps that they use aren't worth a wooden nickel. Now I take this off the tripod, take a look at it with the camera for you. All right, these have no leakage yet, so they're probably fine for a while, and that while could be 2 to 5 years. So I'm not going to urge the guy to spend his money if he doesn't want to. Preventative maintenance can make sense, but it's not doesn't make sense for everyone. So I just want to make sure I wasn't missing something that was going to bite me and the owner in the butt down the road. I didn't really show it, but that screw that holds the reverb card in place was also loose. So let's flip this around, take a look inside. I'm only going to show you things if I see a problem. You've seen a bunch of these on this channel already. Let's look at the lamp holder. He said change the light. It may be that it's shorting out, contacting chassis. It shouldn't be at that angle. Let me make sure that that is tight first. And I've got a special tool, and I do not know where you can get one these days. It used to be made by a company called Mission Amps. I'm sure you could explain the problem and take this measurement to a machine shop and have one made, but it sure is cheaper to buy one of a couple hundred than to have one made. Yeah, that lamp indicator is just really loose. So that can cause all kinds of problems. It's also bent, so we're going to try to fix both. Let me tighten this first. Even with this tool, it's kind of a pain in the butt to do. There's not a lot of space in here. All right, that feels a lot tighter. And let's see, I need, you hear the flathead. Just give that a bit more of an angle. I want that right there to be more straight. Now, they cut it really close to touching the chassis right there. Just let's take a look at it. Fraction of a millimeter. And that's 6.3 amps, 6.3 volts. I think like 5 amps potential. That could be a bad short. For right now, I'm going to see if I can do a fudge just to make sure that nothing's going to go wrong until I get a chance to do that properly. And by properly, I would take the whole thing off and reassemble it with a different angle and maybe put some better material beneath it. For right now, I'm going to try to fit a small piece of painter's tape in there. Pray for me, there's just not much margin of error with sticky things. If this doesn't work, I'll slide a piece of notebook paper in there. There are better long-term solutions, but just to, I'm going to be wiggling on this while I check the tube. See, these are physically loose. These on the tube socket itself, lamp socket. Once I'm sure that the bulb itself is tightened there, I can just put a little bit of nail polish that holds all these in place. I can rotate the whole thing around so that it's not going to short no matter what we do. All right, so with it in standby now, I don't see anything wrong with the amp other than one other thing, which I will show you in just a moment. And it's wrong on most of the reissues. Just want to look at that lamp because he said change the light. And it seems fine. I'm just going to give it a good wiggle. Pretty sure that it is fine now. I think it was so loose before that it didn't have much tension on it. So I will call him and ask him if he wants that to be different. No, see, it's cutting out now when I'm moving it. I don't know if you can see that difference. And I just dropped a piece of metal into a live amp. Notice I did not reach in to grab it with my fingers. Well, now I will, but now I know exactly what's around it. So, when I went to tighten this on, the bulb was cut in and out just a little bit. I don't think it's a problem with the bulb, but it could be. I'll come back to that. I've got other bulbs, but I think that lamp assembly needs to be taken completely apart and rebent a little bit in two different ways so that it won't come as close to the chassis and it has more mechanical strength. If that's not sufficient, that whole assembly is like $5-6. That's not a long-term problem. Let me show you the other thing I see in the amp that needs some help besides the flaws, in my opinion, of this circuit as a concept. All right, I've shown this in other Fenders, but I'll show it in this one too. It's a little bit hard to see because they got so many, they have all the heater wires and they have these reverb cables in the way, but right here we've got pin 1 jumper to pin 6, and we have pin 3 here jumper to pin 8. So we have the plate and the cathode, and 2 connects to 7 all the way over here with this loop of wire. Now this hums. The amps from the 60s did not. What the amps in the 60s did was they had pin 3 connected to pin 8, so the cathodes were tied together, and they had 2 connected straight across the tube to 7, which is well away from the heater wires when this is dressed better. This is not dressed very well. I'll fix that. And then they had the loop from plate to plate. So from 1 to 6 is where the loop is on the old ones, which don't hum. This one hums when you turn the reverb up. And I believe it's, to a large degree, it's because they have this big loop on the grid. It's closer to one heater than the other, and these heaters are close to it. It may have something to do with the plate wiring. I'm not sure, and no other techs I've asked have been sure about that. But the fix is simple. Move the loop to the plates and let the grids go straight across and have some distance between those grids and these heaters. And then the reverb doesn't hum. It's amazing. Fender used to know this back when they were actually Fender. And during the long years of being CBS, they forgot. And no one has reminded them to this day of what they used to know. All right. As far as the noise level goes, where this amp had a big white noise hiss before any volume or reverb, which is also a volume pot, are turned up, it's because of these 2 resistors here and this blue wire here. I don't want to go too far into it other than to say in this circuit, the plate resistors here, which are normally separate for V2 of V1B and V2B, are here joined so that they're mixing. They're doing an active mixing of these 2 tubes right here, and then that goes to just the part of the circuit that in other Deluxe reverbs was just the vibrato channel. The trouble is, by doing it this way, you have an active DC mixer, and there is no offset Because, what's the best way to put this? With this standard Fender circuit where they're mixed right before the phase inverter, it's a mix where each side loses some signal. There's some attenuation. This, if you look at it one way, is a much more efficient mixer, so there's no attenuation, or much less, and so all the background noise also gets amplified. Both channels are hotter and it's noisier. There are other reasons this is noisy, but that's enough for now. There are better ways to do this, but they're difficult to do with the existing PCB. One of the reasons they did this is because they could use the same PCB for this and for the 65 version of the Deluxe Reverb reissue. I can undo it and put in a terminal strip to hold some new components and do it well that way, or I could undo it and put it back to being the 65 Deluxe Reverb. So you only have reverb and trim on the traditional channel, and the custom channel would then just be the Fender normal channel with too much mids. I'll talk to the owner about his options there as well. It may be that he just has me undo this, losing reverb and trim over here, and undoing one other thing, which I'll get to in a moment, and then he'll have a quieter amp. I don't think he needs new tubes unless he's worried about that one groove tubes, 6v6, which again, I'll have to do longer testing to be sure of. The other issue with this amp is that they seriously decreased the amount of negative feedback, which also makes the output hiss. So between the mixers here, which are after the volumes, so it doesn't matter where the volumes are, this adds noise. And then you have the lack of negative feedback. You get that severe hiss at idle. And some people won't know any better, and they're going to think it's fine. And some guys are like, that's driving me freaking nuts. I can't live with that. And on some of them, it's worse than others due to other factors like how noisy or quiet the tubes are. Aside from that slight microphonics, this seems okay. I'm going to put this on YouTube, send it to the owner, and have him call me after he's had a chance to see it, and we'll be on the same page, and he can make informed decisions and ask questions from a point of already knowing a lot. That way, no one likes to be put on the spot. Let's imagine if you had to go to your car mechanic and say, hey, I need this tuned to exactly this ratio, and I need exactly XYZ pressure in this cylinder. 99% of us wouldn't know what to tell them. And 99% of the car mechanics don't want someone coming in there and telling them how to do their job. So I like to give people this kind of information. They can see the technical stuff that's happening. I can explain a lot. We're not going into pie charts. We're not doing formulas. We're talking about, hey, this is the kind of thing that does X, Y, Z. It changes the sound in various ways, and here's how it impacts a musician. And then they know enough to say, hey, you were saying something about that negative feedback. What is that? And then I can explain to them what negative feedback is, or whatever the case may be. It just starts the conversation between me and the owner at a more level place. And because just getting all this into a phone call or getting all this into a written estimate, that'd be a tough job. Videos are great for that.